Hi everyone, Ashri here. As part of a video series about reviewing job descriptions and how bad job descriptions are these days for software developers, I'm going to start picking out job descriptions that I see online, remove the company name and so on and so forth, and review them and give you my perspective on this and why some elements are good, some elements are not good, why they should be, why they shouldn't be mentioned, and so on and so forth. So let's get on with it. So for this job description, it is for a senior full stack developer. So this is for a senior full stack developer. Okay, for a senior full stack developer from a local company in Montreal. The company name is irrelevant, but we're going to go through it now. The first problem we see here is it's for a senior full stack developer at a salary of about 120K. Okay, not too shabby for Montreal, a little bit on the low side, but not too shabby. So let's just go through the responsibilities, the soft skills, the technical expertise that are being asked for, and I'll explain why this is problematic. So, implementing a high performance web API. What does this mean? What do you mean implementing a high performance web API? Can you give me some perspective on the kind of load that we're expecting? Because high performance for one company is not high performance for another. What does high performance mean? Is it a CPU bound? Is it operation? Is it a database bound operation? Is it complex? What's going on with this, right? So, right from the get go, it's a little bit too ambiguous. It sounds good, but it's very ambiguous. Developers need a little bit more detail. So tell me, are we dealing with, how many queries per second? What's your QPS, right? This is what we're dealing with. This is the growth. At least now I know whether I can apply to this, because just this alone, just this concept of implementing a high performance web API tells you nothing. And if as a candidate, I didn't have the experience dealing with high performance web APIs, I may not even apply. I may not apply, right? Okay, now we're going straight to a whole other concept, which is build front-end applications through appealing visual design. Are you asking the developer to design, or is the design going to be given to you? Because those are very different concepts, right? A full stack developer is not a designer, but let's assume it's through a text problem in this case, in the way they describe the item. Please specify. Please be much, much clearer. Design client side and server side architecture. Holy moly. Okay. All right. So, first of all, server side architecture, fair enough, fairly simple, but client side architecture as well. That's front end engineering at that point. You're not asking for a full stack developer. You're asking for two people. I mean, I'm good at my job. I can architect a backend. I can decently architect a front end, but I mean, to do it both, that's difficult. You're asking for a tech lead here with a team. Even a tech lead shouldn't be able to do this, right? Or shouldn't be asked to do this. Now we're also going to build out a web app using responsive design. So now you're also asking for CSS and responsive design, HTML. Again, very problematic, because we just went from designing server-side architecture to building out a web app with a responsive design. Provide and maintain security architecture in front end and back end. Well, listen, every developer needs to understand some aspects of secure development practices, but to provide, right, means that this individual needs to know front end and back end secure architecture, whatever you want to call it, right? That's, yeah. This is a problematic item right here and right there and then. This is your tech lead. This is your CTO. Needs to make sure that the architecture is in fact itself secure by design. So I don't like that line item. It just kind of it just blurs the whole thing, and it already tells me that this company doesn't have a serious engineering organization, right? It's just a bunch of developers coding. So I'm already not impressed. Follow coding best practices. Okay, so What they meant is, can you eat soup without drowning, right? Can you tie your own shoes? I think that's a little bit better. Maybe put on a jacket when it's cold, right? Why even mention this? Why even mention this? What's the point? It's an irrelevant item, completely irrelevant, right? Let's remove this. Not from the responsibility point of view. If you're a good developer, you're going to follow best practices, but best practices are not at the developer level, they're at the organizational level. Are you saying that will the developer be able to follow the coding best practices of your organization? I hope so. It's kind of their job. If you're expecting the developer to come up with the coding best practices, you're going to be in trouble. That's going to be very, very difficult. Okay. It can happen, sure, but that's not for everyone, and that's surely not for a full stack developer. Maybe a senior, fine, but even then. Maintain DB and improve performance of SQL queries. Okay. Listen, I'm a proponent of developers must know SQL. They must be able to write proper queries. Okay. And improving the performance of an SQL query and maintaining a database are two completely different things, but they're so related together. Many developers can improve the performance of a query, but to maintain a database is a skill set in its own right. And what I would say, if this is a concern, there are plenty of fractional DBAs out there that can tap into your SQL server, your Postgres, whatever it may be, and proactively maintain your server for you. Don't put this on the developers. This guy or gal already has enough on their end between server-side architecture and maintaining DB and secure architecture for front end and back end. What else are you going to ask him to make soup? I mean, come on, seriously. Soft skills, fine. Well, let's go through it. Ability to consistently understand and predict problems and propose and implement solutions. What this tells me is this person is not going to be working in a team. That's what this tells me, right? So is this person a tech lead? Are you looking for the right hand of the tech lead, right hand of the CTO? If that's the case, mention it, specify this. This is a lot already, right? Ability to communicate accurately and both verbally and written in English. Fine. This has to be mentioned because it was a Montreal company and we have a lot of francophones, people that speak French primarily, and they need this skill. Fine. Okay. Now, this is a pet peeve of mine. Ability to work in an agile environment. No. Just no. No. What is working in an agile environment? The environment is not agile. Your engineering practices and your engineering culture implies whether you can change the code really fast and deploy it really fast. It has nothing to do with the developer. Zero. Remove this. I see this, and this is the reason why I highlighted this one job description. I see this and I see a problem. Right from the get-go, you're telling me you have no technical organization whatsoever. Your CTO doesn't know what the hell he's doing, right? Or her, right? Sorry for the pronoun. But do not put this in a job description. Just don't. Okay. Strong problem analysis expertise. What does this mean? I mean, what does this mean? It's an unnecessary statement, right? This is something you determine during the interview, and great attention to detail is what you determine during the technical interview. And even then, these two you can try to assess in an interview. I mean, we do that at Red Corner when we do technical assessments for our clients' candidates, but you don't mention this in a job description. And after all of this, I'm going to rewrite this job description to make it more sense. All right, let's go into something really, really nice here. Okay, let's go into the technical expertise that is required. This is a list and a half, right there and then. My personal perspective is if you have more than 4 or 5 technical requirements, you're already way too much. It's just too much. So, proven experience as a full stack developer or a similar role. What does proven experience mean? You've worked for someone? Great. Remove it. Unnecessary, right? They're applying. And what if they were completely self-taught? What if they worked only for themselves as a contractor? They don't have technically any proven experience, right? But, the you don't even need to mention this. It just adds words that confuse and that add content that are really just unnecessary, right? Proficiency in implementing web apps with Angular 15 plus with TypeScript. Okay, now why not just say Angular? Why is it Angular 15 plus specifically? Specifically that version of Angular? That's the baseline. Why not just Angular? That's it. That's all you really need to mention. With TypeScript. Fine. Okay, fine. So you need TypeScript. Great. Great technology. Although, web components is taken over and I'm not a fan of TypeScript anymore, but that's my personal choice, right? So proficiency in implementing web apps. But what does this mean? How big is this web app? Is it going to be an SPA with 100 views and pages, or is it going to be some controls? Give me the level here. 5+ years of JavaScript application development. So if you have proficiency, you don't need this. Plus, what does 5 years mean? Right? When I started the second version of my career, right? I was a .NET developer. I learned Python and Golang, and I got proficient within 3 months. I've never touched the technology before. Those languages, I've never touched them. But I became proficient within 3 months. I was able to code. It's fine. You don't need 5+ years. You need experience in JavaScript application development, or just in JavaScript in general. But here you're mentioning TypeScript, and now you're mentioning JavaScript. You're mentioning Angular 15, and you're also mentioning JavaScript application development. This is unnecessary, okay? And here's another one. So familiar with the latest JavaScript features, ES6. You don't need to be familiar with this, okay? You need to know, you need to have potentially heard about it, but you don't need familiarity with the latest. Again, unnecessary technical expertise requirement, right? Just completely unnecessary. Able to handle front-end and back-end asynchronous communication properly and efficiently with the RxJS library. Just having mentioned RxJS library has limited all of your candidates down to almost no one. How many people have RxJS library experience, specifically with the RxJS library? Because that's literally what it just said, right? Now, many more people can handle front-end and back-end asynchronous communication. That's basic Node.js and JavaScript and whatnot. That's basic development nowadays, right? Almost everyone has it. If you don't have that, you just don't have the right experience. But almost everyone has this, and they can do it properly and efficiently. But they'll do it with any other library. Why is it specifically RxJS library, right? It's these kinds of statements that tell me, as a hiring manager, as a CTO, this is indicative of the perception that we don't have enough developers in the world, in the market. We have enough developers. Stop asking for garbage like this, right? What you could have done is said, ideally with the RxJS library instead of specifically with the RxJS library, and mention any library or no library is fine. Like you don't need to specify this one. This is easy to pick up. I can pick this up. I've never even heard of this, by the way. And I've been in technology for 20 years, and I design these, and I manage close to 150 developers right now for my clients. But I've never heard of RxJS because, well, I've never touched it. Does that make me or my developers any better? Could they apply to this? Because if they see this and this company is going through a traditional HR process or a traditional technical recruiter process, right? People that don't have any technical expertise, they will be filtered out immediately. You don't have RxJS? Sorry, you're done. Advanced experience with HTML5, CSS3, and SCSS. Okay. Now this is all front-end engineering. That's what this is, right? CSS3 is a complicated beast. SCSS, fine. If you know CSS, you'll understand SCSS. It's easy enough. And HTML5. I like how we have to still mention HTML5, right? But what is advanced experience with HTML exactly? Is it like what is it? Divs? How to center a div? I don't know what this means. So this doesn't need to be mentioned, right? And especially advanced experience, because again, advanced experience no longer means you're a full stack developer. What it means is that you're a front end engineer, you're a front end developer, right? Because you're asking for databases and server side architectures and APIs, and apparently implementing a design from Figma. I'm assuming because it's lack of clarity. Don't mention this unless it's a specific front end engineer. Now, familiar with development of cross-browser platform independent front-end applications and PWA. Oh boy. Now, I mean, come on. This is tough. Now we're going into PWA as well, and cross-browser and platform independent. Now you're asking for an additional skill set. PWA is for mobile development. Fantastic technology. I'm all for it. Much better than having your own mobile app most of the time, unless you want to sell it in the App Store. And even then, I believe you can actually push it on the App Store. But what is this, right? This is 3 roles now. There's backend, there's architecture, there's database maintenance, and now there's front-end engineering and mobile. Sorry, there's 5 roles. These are 5 humans that you need. 5 in one job description for 120K. Maybe if they decided to pay 700K a year, I'd say, you know what? Fantastic. I'll take that job. But until then, this is too much. JavaScript build system experience Webpack. You don't need to mention this in any way, shape, or form. If you're using Angular 15, or if you've built sufficiently complicated systems in JavaScript, even PWA, this is an obvious. And why specifically Webpack? There are many others that are just as good. I know Webpack is a very, very popular one. Fantastic. But there are many others that are just as popular. So maybe mention, JavaScript build system experience or exposure. I would say even exposure, not even experience, just exposure. You've worked with it. And even then, even if you haven't, if a developer comes and starts the job and says, oh, you're using Webpack. Okay. Hey, ChatGPT, how do I use Webpack? Or explain to me this code. There we go. You're done. You don't need to mention this. Further alienates more people, right? Now, we're going a full 180 here. Experience working with material UI components in Angular app. What does this mean? Does this mean that they've implemented specific material UI components? And is this an actual experience you need to ask for? Right? Now, this is for an Angular app. So are we doing an Angular app, or are we doing PWA? Because now actually, no, you're right. I was reading Android app. My apologies. But experience working with material UI components. It's a component, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, come on. It's components. It's a helper library. It doesn't matter. It's JavaScript. You don't need specific experience in this. Now we're going to pull another, 180. At this point, we're just spinning in circles with this, right? Knowledge about security issues and OWASP would be an asset. Okay. So most people don't know what OWASP is, right? Most developers have never heard of OWASP. Okay. Even most senior developers have never heard of OWASP. Okay. Most full stack developers, on top of that, which is basically, 2 people in one, don't have experience with OWASP. OWASP is not complicated. It's a list of top 10, top 20 security issues to look into. That's it. That's part of secure development practices. That comes down from leadership. Don't ask people to have this experience. You're hiring a developer. You're not hiring a CTO here. And if it was a CTO, it would all be knowledge of, not implementation of. So a little bit different, right? Even a tech lead. So if OWASP is that important for you, make sure it's part of your secure development practices. Make sure it's part of your code review. And there you go. Now all your developers will know it. Make sure you educate them. Have a webinar about it. Hey, by the way, Mr. Mrs. Developer, welcome to the company. Let's teach you about OWASP right now. Okay? Because this is how we apply things. Experience working with Docker containers, sure, whatever, fine, okay. But I would say not Docker containers. I would say containerized development specifically, right? Because it's one thing to have built Docker containers. It's a whole other thing to have to develop in a containerized environment with being able to debug and whatnot. But you can teach this in about 30 minutes. The reality is, everyone, the reality is that if this employee joins the company, the Docker containers are already there, the debugging is already there, they're going to learn it. Again, another technical requirement that does not need to be explicitly mentioned, right? You want to say exposure to containerized development practices, sure, right? But also mention not absolutely required, nice to have. There you go. Just say nice to have, but won't really make our decision. Okay. Oh boy, this is an interesting one. Okay, so experience in implementing Azure services like IoT, serverless application, and Event Hub would be an asset. So IoT is a subspecialty. Right there and then, it is a subspecialty of software development because it crosses into hardware development, into firmware development. It's not as simple as, hey, let's just plug something in and that's it, right? Serverless applications, okay, fine, fairly simple, not too complicated. Also, doesn't really need to be mentioned because if you can develop code, guess what? You can develop serverless, right? Unless this individual is going to be the tech lead, but it's not. It's a senior full stack developer, right? My assumption is all of this stuff already exists. I've never done serverless application development on Azure, right? I haven't done IoT on Azure, but I've done it all elsewhere. So also even with through Azure services and event hubs. So now we're going. So now this is a messaging architecture streaming type of role, right? I'm not really sure what this company is building at all at this point. Is it an IoT? Is it a web application? Is it a mobile app? I mean, I really don't know, and I removed that to make sure that their privacy is maintained, right? But the name of the company, so that their privacy is maintained. However, this is too much. This is not a senior full stack developer. I'm sorry. This is now you're diving into architecture, full on architecture, right? This is your tech lead's job. This is your CTO's job. And even then, right? Even then, I have fractional CTOs at Red Corner with 20 plus years of experience. Most of them will not be able to do this. After 20 years of experience running the best teams in the world, they would not be able to apply for this job because this is a technical soup. This is a requirements. I don't know what they're asking for. This is a sandwich, basically, a grocery list, whatever you want to call it. Use any analogy and any example you want of how ridiculous this is. Next, proficiency with implementing a web API, security, middleware, authentication, and authorization in .NET Core 6. So I'm assuming that your backend is .NET Core 6. Okay. Does it have to be .NET Core 6 Plus specifically? Or is it just maybe .NET Core, the new variant of .NET Core? Or just in .NET Core in general? Right? Now, I'll accept this. I'm a .NET expert. I understand that .NET Core has seen many changes and many revolutionary changes as of late, right? But still, just say .NET Core. That's more than enough, right? Again, this is deep backend. This is not something simple. This is deep backend. Let's I'm gonna go off the handle here a little bit because experience working with SQL Server, I'm assuming is going to be on Azure, so it's managed SQL Server. So it's just a database, to be honest, right? 90% of what we do is create tables, create columns, migrate, and populate data and CRUD operations. Okay, but they did say maintain the DB, so I don't know what that means. It could be maintain indexes, or it could mean something else. Writing efficient SQL queries. What does efficient mean? Okay, because an efficient SQL query for John is not the same as it is for Sarah, is not the same as in Google, YouTube, or dinky little website, right? They're all very, very different because SQL queries, writing SQL queries is an art and a science. That's the thing. It's an art and a science, and that's it. Yeah, and it shouldn't be so. Okay, and we shouldn't have to. How can I say? Have to even mention the last bit though. The last bit here got me really riled up. Stored procedures, because stored procedures in the modern development practices have fallen out of favor. Even though, yes, they're very efficient because all you're sending is a couple of parameters at a time and stored procedures were fantastic at a time when we had limited network bandwidth, and so sending the entire query actually took up a lot of network traffic, right? But stored procedures are very difficult to maintain. They're very difficult to reverse, right? And if you had any type of CI/CD, would give you a headache, because if you ever needed to revert a build and deploy a previous build, this is a big problem, right? Especially with stored procedures. They're not backwards compatible. You could literally take down your system, create massive corruption. And while stored procedures have a lot of benefit, yes, they're compiled and whatnot. If you write efficient SQL queries, they'll also get compiled, right? I would urge everyone to stay away from stored procedures unless it's a stored procedure that will not change in the future. It just won't change very often, right? But even then, it's maintenance hell. We definitely don't want to have that, right? And the performance benefits you're going to get from a parameterized SQL query and a stored procedure is almost irrelevant. It's negligible, right? So let's rewrite this. Actually, no, let's not rewrite it. I'm going to stop the video at this point because we're 26 minutes in, and that's it.